is Zari Ivey. I am currently in Miami, Florida, and I am the CEO and founder of a marketing and PR agency. We're full service. Most of our clients are or fall into celebrity and influencer owned brands. I do work with some smaller brands that aren't necessarily owned by celebrities or influencers, but for the most part they are. The industries that we serve are fashion and fashion, beauty, but mostly entertainment and lifestyle brands. So really exciting times. I actually have had the agency now for a few years, coming out of corporate America, and it was honestly the best decision I could have made. I feel like it's just more in line with who I am as a person, and kind of just like has allowed me to further align with what I feel my purpose is here on this earth, living this experience. So it's been quite a wild ride. But yeah, that's who I am.
Okay. Yeah. No, that sounds super exciting. Working with celebrities. I'm excited to get to that part of the interview. But before we start, we like to talk a little bit about, is that what you wanted to do growing up? Did you go to school doing that? Like, was that your dream when you were little?
Definitely not. I think like when I think back to when I was like really little, I've always been extremely advantageous. Like I want to do these big things. Like I remember wanting to be an astronaut. I remember wanting to be like a police officer, but like wanting to be a police officer, but also being like, but I'm gonna work like for the FBI, or I'm gonna work for the CIA. Like just like very big dreams and like very big ideas in terms of what I thought I would be. I think by the time I like got to school and really started like learning about different things, I think I had narrowed it down and really had decided that I was going to be an attorney. And it's funny because when I think back like on those years, I'm like, I was really only thinking about like how I would show up in the courtroom, like what my hair would look like, what my outfit would look like if my nails were done. Like that was kind of like the part of that I guess job that I was resonating with the most. Is like how I would look. Crazy enough. But as I kind of continued on in school, like through college, I really started to kind of embrace the more creative side to my personality, which has always been there. I just didn't think that I could ever have a job where my creativity was like what allowed me to be successful in a specific role, like whatever that role was. And so, yeah, I'm quite a ways away from all three of those things that I mentioned, kind of envisioning in my mind when I was younger.
How did you dial into just the attorney side then? I know you had really big dreams from astronaut to attorney seems like a really big stretch.
Yes, definitely. I would say I became very interested in, first of all, like taking classes in high school that kind of allowed me to drill into different areas of like public policy, government, I just like very politically adjacent things. They weren't really like poli-sci classes, right? Because you're just in high school. I did go to a private high school, so the types of classes that we kind of had the opportunity to take were a little bit different. But I would say it was being introduced to those avenues and areas of interest that really allowed me to see how adjacent to the political world things were. I also realized at that point that I'm like, okay, I probably have to study something that I can actually study, like not put myself in a position where I'm studying things that I can't even pay attention to. I would say that I attribute that to like being super creative, that like I can't really concentrate on things for very long. It has always been hard for me. I always got really good grades because I figured it out, but it just naturally, if I wasn't interested in it, it was very hard for me to get through things, right? And so I'm like, okay, I can actually like read these government books. I can read my history books. I'm like connecting things and understanding like how it impacts the way that I live today. Like how is that adjacent to the political world and where I feel like I can actually make a difference, right? And so I think throughout my high school years, I really got introduced to that, and I had the opportunity to like intern even in high school, which was an amazing opportunity. Intern with very prestigious judges, attorneys, public defenders. And so through those experiences, I also got more involved with what it would take, right, to become an attorney or to study law, right? And I knew it was like a big job, but I'm like, I could do this. Like, aside from how awesome I would look doing it, I feel like I can actually, make a difference. Obviously, the experiences that I had shadowing, if you will, interning with the judges was a very eye-opening. And I'm surprised that like it didn't actually want to make me into a judge. I really did still was like very owned in on like the attorney side of things, because I feel like it was the relationship with the judge and like how they were able to create whatever the final verdict was for whatever case they're working on that was of interest to me. And so also had some crazy experiences with some of the attorneys that I was shadowing and working with, like some of those cases that they were working on. Although I can't really, I guess, go into detail about them, they were just like things were happening in those court cases that I would have never imagined would actually happen in real life, right? Because like we all watch or have at least seen bits and pieces of like Law and Order and like these TV shows, and most of the time, I would say maybe like 80% of the time, it's not like that. But for whatever reason, during my experience, I was seeing the things that were kind of unfolding at that level. So it was really cool. Got a lot of the action. Really wanted to and really did see myself in those positions, like playing those roles. I would go back and forth in my mind with like, do I want to be a persecuting attorney? Like, do I want to be like a defense attorney? Like, where would I sit and like why? Like, what's the why behind it? And asking myself those questions. But I kind of just figured once I finish college, like I'll get to the point where I know what side of the fence I want to be on, right? And so I guess having those experiences is really what enabled me to own in on wanting to be an attorney and study law.
Okay. Were those experiences all in like high school, junior high, or was that college?
Yeah, all of those internships that I got awarded were in high school. They were between, I want to say, my sophomore and senior year. The things that were more on the public policy side I really got introduced to that during my sophomore year. I had I guess it was still a history course that I was taking. I don't remember what it was called. It may have been government. I don't even know. But my teacher was really like, oh my God, like you're showing an interest and like real passion. Like I have this opportunity at a college where you're able to kind of leave school early every other week to go to the college, take this course, like you're sitting in a class, essentially you're like auditing a real college course on public policy, right? But then they know which students are like auditing for purposes of like internship sort of credit or high school credit. And so after the course is complete, you kind of leave and then you do these like breakout sessions with whoever the leadership person was. And we were being introduced to the way that they think about finances as it relates to different parts of public policy. So like education, like health systems, things like that. And I really, really enjoyed that work. But then coming out of there, obviously she recommended me to take certain AP courses as far as government is concerned. And so through those courses, I was introduced to programs that were happening at state colleges. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. And so that particular public policy course happened at Baldwin Wallace. After that, there were opportunities through Case Western Reserve and Cleveland State University, their law schools, had summer internships where then I was able to shadow judges. I was then throughout after that internship kind of closed, I then got the opportunity, right, to do these other things with the public defenders and the prosecuting attorneys that were kind of in greater Cleveland. So it was kind of like one opportunity led to the other. And like, I would say the number one thing that I think allowed me to get those opportunities was just being very open to to anything. Like, I didn't really know what was going to happen. I don't think I was in high school. I wasn't like expecting to get a job per se, or like really anything other than, okay, the internship is done, like, see you later. But I think because of how open I was, but also the passion that I was showing for like what the topics were that we were discussing and just like how things were working, people saw that and, you know, they wanted to support the passion, being that I was still in high school. So
Yeah,
that
no,
was
that's
a
super
long-winded
interesting.
answer.
No, it's great. No, but you explained a lot. Do you think that were these programs, these internships at the state level, local level, federal level,
um,
and and
oh,
and
go ahead.
just one more
Yeah, go ahead.
question on top of that is, it could anyone go after these internships if they were from any school, or did they have to have gone through sort of the programs that you went through to be eligible for application?
Okay, so they were definitely all at the state level. None of them kind of transcended beyond that, because I think that kind of entails a little bit of different need from an internship level. Like, I'm sure that they could have pushed us to doing things at a higher level, right? Because we actually did have the opportunity to go to and do something related to like the Supreme Court, but like that was that was just like a one-off opportunity within the program, right? So mostly everything that we were working on and like the tasks that they would give us were all at the state level. We did do like mock trial sort of things where they would give us like an old case that we would have to kind of run through, and they would tell us which side we were going to argue. We would do those things in front of real judges. They would kind of give us feedback and things like that. So it was very intensive, to be honest. But I would say, when I think back to the other students that were a part of these programs, not all of them were from my high school. So there were a couple from my high school, especially thinking about the public policy. There were like a few people from my high school, but then they were just from surrounding high schools in the area, some of which were private, some of which were public. So it didn't really even matter at that level either. And then when I think back to the opportunities that happened more on the law side of things, I was the only one from my high school. So I think it was just sort of like the opportunity came across and I said yes to it. But there were other schools who probably had similar experiences with teachers like telling them you should do this, or saying, would you want to be a part of this? And again, private schools, public schools, Catholic schools even were involved in that. Some of them happened throughout the school year, but others we had to commit to doing during the summer, right? Like on our own time.
Okay, yeah. And earlier in the interview, you spoke a little bit about creativity and how you sort of had that issue reconciling between how can I be creative and be in a career. Could you talk a little bit more about like what you mean by creativity, like what type of creativity
Yeah,
maybe?
for sure. Well, I think that like creativity is very like objective. Like, it's not, oh, I can like draw, so that makes me creative, or oh, I can paint, or like do things that we on a surface level associate with being artistic. Like, I think sometimes being artistic and being creative are used interchangeably, but I don't think that creativity should be just limited to being artistic or having artistic abilities, whatever medium that means on the artistic side, because I think that having critical thinking skills makes you creative, right? Like being able to problem solve, being able to see something for more than what it is, right? Can, in my mind, it can be considered having a creative mind. And so for me at a young age, I think I was definitely in a box, and I'm not sure why. I'm not sure. I don't feel like my parents ever necessarily made me feel like that, because they're both also very creative, but they also both have very traditional careers, right? And so maybe it was a little of seeing, within my own personal environment, that and not wanting to explore it, because it's like, oh well, like they're creative but they don't have creative jobs, so maybe that's like not a thing. I don't know. So putting myself in a box in terms of using that language interchangeably, artistic versus creative. And so it wasn't until being in high school and having these experiences, and specifically the high school I went to Gilmore Academy in Cleveland, Ohio, and being challenged the way that school educates, in terms of like promoting conversations within the classroom. Like we would do these things called Socratic seminars, right? Where the teacher would ask us a question, and like he or she would sit back, and like they would get involved, like the conversation kind of was going a way that it shouldn't go, and or got out of hand. But for the most part, it was us discussing amongst ourselves, like, here's the question that we were asked, or like, here's the problem we were asked to solve. Like, how are we going to solve it together? Like, and it was a room full of people that didn't look the same, right? There were girls, there were guys, there were people that looked like me, there were people that didn't look like me, had different backgrounds, both ethnically and just like in terms of where they were from. Some people that I went to high school with weren't even from the United States. They boarded at our school, right? So it was definitely, I got a different type of education when it comes to that. And I think that being put in those positions, especially within a classroom or like educational space, allowed me to develop but critical thinking skills that then allowed me to see, like, well, wait a minute, this is not like, being creative shouldn't just be subjected to like artistic ability, right? Like I can be creative with the way that I respond to things. I can be creative with the way that I think about things that may be outside of the norm. To come up with ideas that most people probably wouldn't come up with, because they are thinking inside of the box, or just thinking along mainstream ideals.
Okay. Yeah. And then, so from the high school experience, what did you do to transition into the college, I guess? Like, how was the application? How did you choose the colleges? And
So my dream school was actually the University of Southern California. I wanted to be a Trojan so bad. So much so that I was like, Mom, I'm only applying to this school. And she's like, okay, well, you can't do that because you need to go to college somewhere. And I am not going to be the bearer of bad news, but like, we don't know what's going to happen. Like, right? Like, yeah, what if you don't get accepted? Then what? And I'm like, okay, fine. So I applied to all different types of schools, to be honest with you, because I think at that point, having the experiences that I did with like wanting to be an attorney and like, this is so cool, I was still not 100%. And I say this looking back, I didn't know this then, but looking back, I realized that I was still kind of torn. Like, I want to do this, but like, I just feel like there's something else, but I don't know what it is. And I also don't know how to put it into words, like what I would be doing if I could do anything, right? And so I kind of was just like, well, I want to be in California, so I'm going to like apply to all these California schools. I knew where in the country I wanted to be. And then I was also like, well, like Arizona is like right there, and like Vegas is right there. Like, let me just also apply to these schools, right? So it was less about, for me, and I know that that was not how most of my peers were doing it. They were like, I want to be this school is known for this. Like that's why I want to go to that school. So I was not like that. I was like, I want to be in California. So these are the schools I'm applying to, right? Unfortunately, I did not get into USC. I was devastated. But I did get into several other schools in California. But then at that point, I was like, I didn't get my first choice. Like, maybe California just like isn't for me. Like, I'm not going to do that. I chose to go to Arizona State, and that was an experience. That is one of the biggest, if not still the biggest university in the United States. 95,000 students spread across 4 different campuses. That was a crazy experience. I think within like 6 months, I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to graduate if I stay here. So like, what else is out there? And what actually led me here to Miami was applying at the University of Miami. They obviously have a really good law school. They have a really good business school. But that is, I didn't, that kind of still went over my head. I was like, I like when going back, after realizing that Arizona State like wasn't my jam, I visited one of my friends. I played soccer in high school. Visited one of my friends from the team. She was like, "You're gonna love it here. Like, trust me. Like the school, like the team, like everything. Like, just come." I came. I fell in love. I decided to transfer. And I think that it was at that point that I started to be introduced to this world of like PR. I guess was like traditional PR was what it was at that point in time, like pitching to media being involved in things, creating events, creating experiences for brands to come to life, to tell stories, again, through different publications. And at that point in time, magazines were still a huge thing. And so I kind of gravitated towards that lifestyle and that type of career, I guess. I was mostly introduced to it through like peers of mine who were having internships with like major publications here. Obviously, lifestyle, nightlife, celebrity, all of that is like a huge thing here in Miami. And so I think getting a taste of that made me realize, well, wait a minute, there's like this whole other like way of like working that's like still very much so rooted in ideas and like corporate, right? Like the corporate way of thinking about having a job, but you have to be extremely creative to like be in this world. And in any way, shape, or form, that could be artistic creativity and it could be like intellectual creativity. So having that experience, I started kind of just like looking for opportunities, like what exists out here. Like, can I intern with a magazine? Can I intern with this job? Can I intern? And what fell in my lap as I was trying to kind of figure out my footing, still going to school for like your traditional political science, international relations, economics. Like, I think by the time I had transferred, I dropped the poli-sci and I was just focused on international relations and economics. It's like a dual major, but I was still doing that, but also like trying to figure out like what this other world was. And in doing so, what kind of fell in my lap was the opportunity to work for this new startup. It was called BoxyCharm. I don't know if you're familiar with the subscription box industry, but it is a makeup subscription box. At the time, the box was $21 a month. You would get 5 full-size items. I was able to sit down with the CEO at the time. He was also running a different business, and so he was needing to like really create some more manpower on the team. And so he's like, what kind of experience do you have? Like, and I'm like, I'm really just looking for an internship. I've only really ever worked retail to get myself through college. Like, I don't have tons of experience, but in retail, like I am at the manager level. So like, there are things about running a business that I do understand, at least at a ground level. So like, I'm very teachable. Like, I'll do whatever you want me to do. And he's like, you're hired. He hired me on the spot. And I'm like, for what? And he's like, oh, like, I don't even know yet, but just like, we need help. And I'm like, you don't know what you're hiring me for, but like, you're hiring me for more than an intern. He's like, yes, like, we'll figure it out later. So I went over, I sat with the girls and kind of like, that was like the beginning of what would become like, what took me to where I am today. I was essentially like employee number 5 or 7 or something like that at the company. And the company ended up growing massively over like 5 or 6 years. We were a unicorn. Literally got to see growth from less than like 5 or 10,000 subscribers through upwards of 1.5 million subscribers. We were acquired for $500 million by our biggest competitor. Yeah, so got to see it through acquisition, stayed on the team for a couple years after, and then really just decided that it was my time to like do my own thing, right? But that was a wild experience. And that was really where I got the intel and knowledge, first of all, of how businesses are like run, right? From the ground up, how they're started, how to think about them, but also on the marketing side of things. Like when you have a really good product, marketing comes so easily, right? But it was also at the point in time where marketing, the world of marketing was changing, right? Like that was in, I want to say 2013, 2014. So social media becoming a marketing vehicle was just beginning to kind of switch over. YouTubers were becoming a thing. Influencers were becoming a thing. And I think that is what clued me into this world of digital marketing that really allowed me to kind of figure out, this is who I am. This is what I'm good at. Like, I understand this intrinsically. Like, there's nothing, like, of course, I still learn. I still absorb knowledge. I still read publications to, like, stay up on things because you have to. Things are changing, like, every 6 to 9 months, if not more. But I got the ability to kind of run his merchandising team, right, which was the buying team that sourced, curated, and placed product inside of the box month over month. Built those workflows, and through, dealing with some of the biggest brands in the beauty industry, we're talking like the Estee Lauders of the world, Anastasia Beverly Hills, MAC Cosmetics, like brands at that level, and now like Fenty. I was able to understand that at that time, so prior to Fenty even becoming a thing, right? Like MAC and the Estee Lauder brands were kind of like running the markets. And so talking to them, they didn't understand social media. They didn't understand influencers. They didn't understand how to piece together these campaigns in a way where they didn't feel like they were spending all this money and didn't have an ROI from a business perspective. And so I was able to kind of convince them that BoxyCharm could handle all of that for them, and that they could kind of reallocate their marketing dollars elsewhere in the business that kind of made the most sense. Because what BoxyCharm was doing was coming in and purchasing product from them, right, at cost, so that they could then, again, reallocate their dollars for marketing elsewhere, because we would handle the marketing after the product was placed in our box. We'll give it to X amount of subscribers. We'll give it to X amount of influencers. We'll put you on our social. We'll give you preferential placement on our emails, in our texts, on our website. We'll run promotions, all of those things. So I was building multi-million-dollar marketing campaigns for some of the biggest brands in the industry. And so once I understood what BoxyCharm's competitive advantage was, we built our whole pitch to the brands around that. We know that they need marketing and they don't understand this piece of marketing. Let them reallocate those dollars. Let us handle it. And all we have to do is purchase their product at cost, right? So I was able to build the brand marketing teams up from scratch, given what I understood about the competitive advantage. And then kind of just built on that throughout my time with them. I started as a manager with zero experience, but then worked my way up kind of until I was an executive, right, for the business, helping make final decisions for both what would be in the box, what brands we would work with, how we would partner with them. And again, just building those marketing campaigns from scratch and figuring out how many times we need to post about them, what channels are we putting them on, what is our strategy for Instagram versus TikTok versus YouTube, and so by the end of that journey, I was like, I need to be doing this for myself, and I want to, I know I can, and so I bet on myself, and it's the best decision I could have ever made.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of like on the job learning and trying to figure out this new world. Did any of your past experiences, like in all the internships that you did in high school, and also you said there's a little bit of retail background as well, did that contribute at all, or was it just you were sort of starting from scratch as you were a blank slate trying to learn?
I would say it was a little bit of both, right? So, when I think about what was needed to actually merchandise product, that for me was kind of I didn't understand what merchandising was, first of all. Like, what I understood was that we need to have the best products in the box, right? Which essentially boils down to curation, right? Looking at an array of something and being able to say that out of these 50 things, these 5 things are the best for X reasons, right? And so that came naturally to me, I think. And again, just going back to like what creativity is, but also like having an eye for things, I think is something that maybe can't be taught. I don't really know how I feel about that, but I think it's something that does either you either have the traits that come naturally to be able to do that and then build on it and like get better at it, or you don't. I think that's kind of where I stand. So I do feel I intrinsically have like an eye for these things. And so having to understand like consumer behavior, like that stuff definitely was like learned on the job, right? Because you don't really even understand what consumer behavior is until you're like inside of a business and understand who their customer is. That's like the first thing. Then it's like, well, how does this customer behave both within the confines of our business, but also like on a broader scale? Because then you're thinking about how to reach those people if you don't already have their attention. So I think, from that perspective, it was a lot of like, me putting what I was naturally good at together with what I knew I needed to learn in order to be the best that I could be in that role. And then like obviously the marketing thing, I think I think anybody my age probably has a leg up in the realm of digital marketing just because we intrinsically understand how it works, as opposed to someone that may be slightly older than us or even sometimes slightly younger than us. Like they have to kind of figure it out in a different way, because they didn't, like, younger people are growing up with it, so it's completely different, right? But for us, we were like, I was maybe 9 or 10 when like the internet became a thing and you can plug the thing into the wall and it was like dialing up. Like I was like 9 years old. Maybe I was younger than that, even 7 I might have been. But remembering that and like remembering the pretenses on which the internet was like created on and how people would search even before YouTube, like how people were searching on like Yahoo and Bing, and like again before Google was like the number one search engine, right? Like having that understanding, and maybe not everybody was paying attention the way that I was, but I know that I was paying attention to those things because I was so like amazed with how we were able to access all of these things online, right? And so having that knowledge, but then also knowing what I don't know and what I need to learn, like putting that one and one together was very helpful for me. I definitely don't think I was specifically learning any of those things in school, but obviously in school you learn how to research, you learn how to utilize those sorts of like soft skills to transfer to create hard skills for a specific job. So that's what I would say. But I also had friends that were in business school and went to school for marketing, and like some of the stuff that they learned wasn't necessarily in the textbook. So I think it's okay not to rely on what you went to school for, unless of course you're going to school to be like a doctor or a lawyer or like an engineer, right? Like it's different when you have sort of like a non-specific major, like a business or a political science or it's different.
Do you think it's the problem solving skills that you were learning, especially you mentioned like the Socratic method where you're actually, debating with other people and trying to problem solve together and logically frame things? Do you think that is a contributor to,
for sure,
what? Okay.
Yeah, for sure. And it also helps me to understand how to work with other people, right? Because I think that that's also half the battle, especially in a startup like environment. It's not just like one person's idea and then like they're taking it to the CEO and the CEO's like, yes, that's the most genius thing ever. Like Joe Martin, CEO of BoxyCharm, he would challenge everything that we said, right? Like he wasn't just like oh, I believe you, just like go do it, right? It was like, okay, but what about this? Okay, but what about this? Okay, but what about this, right? And he's like, whether or not he believes that whatever you said the first time would actually work, he's trying to poke holes to see, like, have we really thought everything through before we were implementing something? And so I also contribute a lot of the growth that I had within the first couple of years to like him and the way that he led our teams internally. He also had a lot of knowledge as far as SEO is concerned. His first business he built entirely on the knowledge of like SEO and like growth hacking. At the time, you know, there were not as many, like there were way more loopholes, right, with that sort of stuff than there are now. Like they started cracking down on it. It's harder to do, but I think him putting himself in a position to have to figure those things out to build a successful business that also, you know, was triple digits in terms of growth for him prior to BoxyCharm, put him in a position where he had to understand intrinsically his product and how to market it this time around, right, with BoxyCharm. So everything we did was challenged, and I really do and would say that a lot. I grew a lot from that, even on its own. If I didn't have school, if I didn't have my own critical thinking skills, I would have had to create them, right? Just being under his leadership. Like I said, especially those first few years. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think was it about you that made him go, you know, I'm going to hire you. I know you have no experience, but let's give it a shot because I need people.
Right. I think again, the passion, right? But also like the openness and the willingness to kind of do what needs to be done. I think a lot of times, just like being the type of person that approaches things in a very positive way can almost always outweigh skill. And I don't mean to say that in a way that like skill doesn't matter, or even say it in a way that makes it seem like I don't have skill. But at the same time, I just feel like if you're teachable, then it will like, you know what I mean? Like those hard skills will come with time. And I think people are also willing to put in the time when they recognize the type of person that you are. And I think sometimes it's hard for people to be very open and vulnerable in terms of the type of person that they are, because sometimes they're intimidated by the type of role that it is. They think that they don't have enough experience, right? But like really the truth of the matter is that like none of us have enough experience, right? When we're first starting out, we all have to start out somewhere. Even after going to school, you find yourself in the job market like having to start with entry level jobs, right? Unless you know somebody and your network and connections, you know, surpass those of the average person. I think everybody finds themselves kind of starting at the bottom of the barrel. And so just like being okay with that and knowing that with that comes more learning opportunities, I think is the perspective that people should have, right? Again, I understand having connections and like being able to kind of surpass those things, but the average person doesn't have those connections. And so like remembering that and just like remaining humble through the process and like being open to the process, loving the process, I think is the first part of like the state of mind you have to be in when you're going after any opportunity that you may feel slightly intimidated by, again, from the sense of like maybe not having enough experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I really like that advice, actually. I think a lot of people have that where they are a little bit concerned about their personal skills or something like that. And people can see that a lot of times. Yeah. So start for after BoxyCharms, right? That's the name of the company.
Yeah. BoxyCharm.
Okay. So after BoxyCharms, what happened afterwards? Like, is this where you transitioned into your own career?
Yeah. I mean, after the acquisition, and I don't know like how familiar you guys are with like companies getting acquired from like an internal perspective. Externally, I feel like it always has a negative connotation. Internally, it's not so much different, but and I like me saying this has nothing, I'm not attaching it specifically to the situation. However, you know, the expectation that the consumer has, right, when any company gets acquired, sometimes is not always the best. And so internally speaking, definitely had an interesting experience that I will never forget. It just allowed me to step back a little bit because I had been like heads down, knee deep, like for the past 8 years. I don't even know. Like time was like, it felt like a time warp, right? But just like heads down in the work of like trying to build and scale this business as best as I could, right? As in terms of an individual, I ended up being one of at least, I want to say almost 500 people by the time I left. But in the very, very beginning, it was very much so like each one of us had our own area, right? And until the company had enough revenue to begin to scale and hire from the top down. And so being in that whirlwind for so long, you kind of just like have very narrow vision, right, for what it is you're working on, what it is you're trying to build, the velocity at which you're trying to do it. And so throughout the acquisition, I think the acquisition started in 2018 or 2019. Yeah, 2019. Sorry, I'm like trying to think like, when did that actually happen? 2019. And I stayed on the team for like 2 years after, and it was awesome. Like the team that acquired us was awesome. We did a lot of integration and a lot of things, but obviously, which is natural, things started changing. And it was then when I started to step back and started to see like, okay, all these things are changing. I don't know how much of BoxyCharm will be left in the next 2 years or the next 3 years, not in terms of like the company itself, but just like internally speaking, the ways of working, what I was getting out of it at a personal level, right? I don't know how much of that will be left. So like, what am I going to do? Like, am I just going to go to the next company? Like, how can I just work for another company having all of this information and like knowledge, especially at the corporate level? I mean, it's okay. I never want to deter anybody from, you know, entering the corporate workforce because it's needed. And like, I think that it can be an extremely valuable opportunity for a lot of people, right? But I'm also like one of the ones that's always like, but like, what else is there? Like, and if I don't feel like I'm making like an extreme immediate impact to the bottom line of any business, like I don't feel like I don't have like that self-actualization and moment where I'm like, okay, like we're doing this, like things are changing, I'm impacting change, whether it's good or like it needs to be worked on, like whatever it is, like I want to feel like I'm involved in the growth of the company. And so I think what I was searching for, I wasn't sure I was going to find, just like trying to be the next marketing executive for so-and-so beauty brand or brand at large, right? And so I really did want to dabble in creating something of my own just to see, like, can I do this? Like, am I too early? Like, let's see. Let's just like take a bet on Zari. So I did that. I took the leap of faith. I parted ways with BoxyCharm at the end of what year is it? It's 2022. So at the end of 2021, I parted ways with them and really just started to ramp up the efforts that I had already kind of started just like on the side. But ramped up the efforts even more so and like legitimized the business and like all of those things, took all the necessary steps to start really creating what essentially could maybe at some point become a full-scale, full-service agency. And I just find that it's working really well for me. So that's kind of how I made that transition. It was just kind of like having a moment to step back and look at everything that I had accomplished, but also really ask myself, like, do I really still feel like this is for me? And is it still doing what it did 7 years ago in terms of like the passion and the amount of effort and at the end of the day, again, what I was getting out of it at a personal level. did I feel that growth, that same amount of growth still.
Yeah. Well, so during this time frame that you were growing with BoxyCharms, were you building at all any of your own sort of personal brand, or did you kind of utilize your experiences and then parlayed it to communicate, hey, this is what I did for someone else? Like, what was that process like to be able to jump from almost corporate in a sense, but it's startup, into corporate, and then into your own agency?
Yeah, so honestly, I owe all of the success that I've had up until this point with the agency to the relationships that I was able to build throughout my time at BoxyCharm. Obviously, being like employee number 5 and like literally jumping into dealing with brands on my second day was interesting, right? Because at first the brands were like, well, okay, like, who are you? First of all, who is BoxyCharm? And also, like, I've never heard your name before. Like, the beauty industry is literally this small. Everybody knows everybody. If you work at this brand, you've worked at 17 other brands, so someone knows you in some way, shape, or form. And so, like, me coming into these conversations, and forgot to mention, most of the conversations that I was having on the BoxyCharm side to pitch into these larger brands were happening to executives on the other side, right? So they weren't managers, right, that we were pitching to get product. They were the presidents, the VPs, sometimes the CEOs were involved in these conversations because it was such a new concept. They're like, we're not just going to let go 20,000 units of something and not know where it's going or what's happening to it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they were larger business conversations, right, in terms of partnerships. Because at that point, it was very similar to the way that a retailer would be pitching to a large brand, right? We weren't a retailer because we weren't selling the products individually, but it was very similar, right? And so having those conversations with those people, I was obviously able to establish myself, first of all, as like a salesperson, and a really good salesperson at that, because I had never done this job before, but I was getting the boxes filled, right? And with really good brands. But then once I realized what our competitive advantage was and kind of built our script and pitch around that competitive advantage, they started seeing me as like a marketing mind, right? Like, you're not just like selling a concept to us that may or may not actually work for our business. You're actually putting action behind it, and the actions behind it are causing lift in our brands, right? So yes, of course, BoxyCharm was growing triple digits year over year, which made us fall into the realm of like unicorn companies. But then on the flip side, it's like the partnerships that we were building and that I was mostly responsible for building, especially in those first 4 years, we're seeing between 20 to 40% brand lift, right? After being featured, going through a marketing campaign that we built for them. So with that, I was able to kind of, to your point, build my own personal brand in terms of who I am as a person, the way that I think about things, my POV when it comes to marketing, specifically digital, across social, and then partnerships. And so upon leaving BoxyCharm, opportunities did sort of just like flow, right? And I didn't stop the flow. I was like, okay, these things are flowing. I need to take advantage and figure out like how I'm going to work with the opportunities. It also put me in a position to be able to say no to certain opportunities that didn't really align with where I see myself now or where I want to go, which also was like a realization of like, wow, okay, I'm here. Like, I'm not just, this isn't this isn't just like me doing it for fun. It's not a joke. Like, I've actually gotten myself to a point where people do respect my POV and they are looking for the type of support that they know that I can offer, that obviously makes a difference for their brand and their business. And so I would definitely, again, say that I owe a lot of that to those relationships, brands figuring out that I'm not with BoxyCharm anymore, calling me, texting me, emailing me, sending me like as a referral to other brands, headhunters reaching out to me, trying to figure out like where I'm going next. And I'm like, I do consulting. And they're like, we have a brand, right? So that's really why I would say that like being open being able to showcase like who you are as a person, I think can sometimes just take you a little bit further than skill itself, because people want to be surrounded by positive people. People want to be surrounded by people that care about what it is that they're doing, even at a small scale, right? And I think that is contagious and infectious, and people want to naturally be around it. So I would just, again, attribute that to my personality, and how I was raised, really, because my parents definitely supported and encouraged me being able to lead with my personality, right? I have a huge personality, and I always have from a very young age. And so just having encouraging parents that really just allowed me to be myself at all times. Still to this day, I'm like, if I can't be myself, I don't belong there.
Yeah. Did you naturally have a desire to just build relationships with people the moment that you meet them, or was that a cultivated skill set that you had?
I think naturally I just like people. Like, I like connecting. I like having conversations. I like understanding people. But I do think that, like, going back to my earlier years and like specifically the experience that I had in high school, with Gilmore, the types of people that I was introduced to at that point in time in my life really got me to understand, and gave me experiences, to understand different cultures, right? Like I mentioned, not everybody at the school was like from the United States, or like even living in the United States as far as their families were concerned. That was like the first piece of it. But then come like my senior year, I was able to do a senior trip to Central America, where I stayed there for like 2 months, right? And I had that kind of immersive experience. Those sorts of experiences were given to me as opportunities all throughout high school, in terms of like meeting with people that don't look like me, that don't necessarily think like me, that aren't from where I'm from, and that intrinsically may not even understand the way that I live, right? And so that's just interesting to me, right? But it also boils down to, at this level, when I meet someone, I don't just assume anything about them, right? Which I think allows me to be curious enough to want to have a conversation, and curious in a good way. Like I'm never like trying to figure something out and then like to use it against the person. It's always just like using it to be able to further connect, right? And on a deeper level than just, surface. Because I think beyond this like human experience, and this is kind of going off on a different topic, but I'll say it for the sake of the conversation, it's just that like beyond the human experience that we have, like we all are also living like a spiritual experience, whatever that means for you. If you're religious, if you're not, like whatever, there is something beyond just like this, right? And so being able to connect with people and truly understand who they are and like what they're about helps me to connect with people and understand them maybe deeper than your average person would. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great perspective. A lot of people do underestimate the power of relationships, and I love that you keep touching upon it. And it clearly your success is the fruit of it. So, could you walk us through a little bit about the day-to-day differences between your time at BoxyCharm versus your day-to-day now, and just kind of explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, and it's so crazy because I never really stopped to think about it, but like over the past couple of weeks, I've been reminded of what it actually is. I actually was sick for like 2 weeks. Last week I had the flu, I had strep, like it was like a crazy thing. And I'm like, is this COVID happening to me for the third time? It was not. It was literally just the flu. I'm like, the flu still exists, like these other bugs still exist, like whatever. But I think with that time off, I really did start thinking about like, oh my God, I'm responsible for so many things, and like so many people are like relying on me, and like I still have to like be able to at least like give them whatever guidance and support they do need, even at a small level, right? Which is very different than like where I was at BoxyCharm. Obviously, people relied on me, the business relied on me to do things when they needed to be done, and like timelines were like drilled into our head, like had to drill them into my own head at one point in time, because the CEO, he didn't always know what I was doing, right? He's like, I know that you need to get this done, and if I don't see product in the box by this date, like I know you haven't done something right, but that doesn't give me any indication of like when something actually needs to be done based on the process, right? And you really only know the process when you're the one in the trenches, like doing the work. So I think those days have like definitely informed putting myself on a schedule and like managing myself, right? Which allows me to be, I think, a really good leader within my own agency, but also just like a CEO of a company, having to be extremely, I'm not saying you have to be type A to be a CEO, but like I am extremely type A. And so having those organizational skills and like just really ensuring that like everything is as organized as possible running the business, I think is like where it starts for me and the work that I have to do. I do juggle multiple clients at one time that all run on their own timelines, deadlines, and have their own differentiated needs. And so outside of like running the business at an executive level for the agency and like understanding finances, cash flow, like, I don't know, who my clients are and what they need at what time. It's like within the realm of like one client also having to understand like what their needs are, how soon I need to get something done, who I need, what type of support within the agency I need to get that done. It's very much like Tetris, I think, beyond that initial top level of the agency, and just the admin work that needs to be done. So I do wear several hats still, which is very similar, but I would say what's different is just being responsible for everything and that level of just like, oh my God, like, have I done everything that I needed to? Like, just being responsible for things outside of myself, and just a company at large is just like the biggest difference. And I don't know if I'm doing a good job explaining that, but
like, could you walk us? Yeah, I think you did a really great job, but to kind of dial it in a little bit, maybe go through, what does a single day look like, right? Is it cold calling people? Is it just responding to inbound, or what does this look like?
Yeah, so I would say, like, I'll just take today, like, aside from like the personal part of my day, which is like preparing myself to actually do these things, which is a whole nother like journey that I go on starting at 4 a.m. in the morning. But by the time I sit down at my desk, it's usually around like 7:45 or 8 in the morning. And I start with my emails just because like I don't like unanswered emails. I don't like people waiting for me, even if I have to tell them I need to get back to you because I need to do X, Y, and Z before I can give you like a firm final answer. Like, that's fine. But I just like can't have people like not hearing from me, right? I try to get back to them within like a day. Sometimes it takes me 2, but that is the longest I will ever have somebody waiting is 48 hours for something. And so I try to get through my emails. Most of it is like inbound stuff that's coming in, either a request from a client and or just like support or approvals that are needed from the team in one way, shape, or form. And then from there, I kind of work on project-oriented things. So if I owe someone a strategy, if I owe someone a tactical, like a plan that needs to be implemented that week, like I will send those things to them. And then usually by midday, I'm sending any updates that have either come from those morning emails or that have come from me working on like big picture project sort of things to the team so that they understand if anything has changed, new objectives, new action items, and or just like following up on something either from earlier in the week or maybe the week before. And then the later part of the day, I do have 2 kids. I have 2 boys. My oldest is 8, Zion, and my youngest is 4, Zeke. So I'm usually like running around, picking them up, dropping them off at sports, or just coming home and doing homework. So I do have to kind of like take a break for that. But then I'm right back online, probably around like 4, until like 6 or 7. Then it's dinner time, and then I'm back online at like 10 just to like wrap anything up for the day after the kids have gone to sleep. And so it's mostly following up with things unless I am in the middle of like a project. My team is really good at handling projects. I just have a couple of like A-list clients that I like to be very involved in. And so those I handle myself. I don't have the team step in too much, and unless I need like support, like tactical support, or like just smaller action items that need to happen. So yeah.
Yeah, could you? I know your time is a little bit shorter. I'm trying to be respectful of it. Just
No,
kind of
you're
quickly.
good. No, we're actually good. You're good. Yeah.
Okay. Could you kind of describe a little bit about like what do you do for the you
Yeah.
just mentioned A-list celebrities? Like, what do you do? Like, what are the services that you provide?
Yeah. So okay. It's actually kind of twofold still. Because not every potential client comes to me and needs full agency support, I do offer like consulting services. So some of what I do is purely on a consultant basis, where I'm literally just providing support and feedback. I'm not necessarily executing anything. With some of that consultant work, I oversee some teams where I'm giving them insight, and insight to be able to execute on certain things, and or I will partner with their lead of X team internally, whether it's their brand team, their marketing team, their sales team, their partnerships team, like whatever it looks like, their structure, because each brand structure is different. But it's mostly those 4 areas that I'll partner with to create business strategies, right, for that business unit. If it's not a consultant sort of thing, I am giving like full blown agency services to the brands. And there are a lot of celebrities that have skincare brands, that have makeup brands, that have clothing brands. And so for those, I handle, again, the strategy, the execution across social, influencer, and event, mostly. Sometimes it falls outside of that. Sometimes I'll do things for their web. But the website and email and SMS gets a little trickier. So I can provide those services, but more often than not, they have those teams already staffed internally. They usually just need external support for social driven things, PR driven things, and then influencer driven things. Influencer meaning just if they are promoting a specific collection, they want both their celebrity friends, but then also people in the industry that seem more like me and you, but that, run their own social accounts across social media channels, TikTok, Instagram, whatever. They're also promoting. And then there are certain celebrities that also are just trying to create or like break into the space, whether it's the beauty industry, the fashion industry, etc. And so I'm working with them on product development. And then that's pretty much it. Like I'm getting a lot of requests to manage talent. I don't do that currently just because I feel like it may get muddy, right, with the work that I do with like enlisting influencers and celebrities to promote things. But perhaps in the future, I will create a part of, the company that does that remains separate from the agency work that we do. And then perhaps they just partner whenever it's needed. But yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like you're living the dream life for a lot of people, working with celebrities directly, marketing. I think that's a really big thing now that people probably weren't thinking about years ago, right? Everyone's thinking Mad Men for
Definitely
marketing,
not.
right?
Definitely not. And even me as a young person, I'm like, I would have like if I could talk to 10-year-old me, 10-year-old me would be like, what are you doing? How are you doing this? Like, I didn't even realize that this was a job. Like, you know what I mean? So yeah, for sure. I get it. It's definitely a whole new world.
What would you recommend? Like, let's say a junior high school student or a high school student was watching this. What do you think that they should do to get to sort of where you're at? I really do think that you have this is one of the most interesting interviews because you work with celebrities, which I think very, very few people in the world get to do. So
yes. I mean, so it's hard for me to answer because, like, obviously I didn't have a traditional route to where I am now, right? I was first introduced, just to back up a little bit, a lot of what BoxyCharm was known for was like our influencer network, right? Like we were a social first and influencer first brand. And so for us, building relationships, I can't say anything again, building relationships with creators that we understood could help grow our business by just giving their raw, uncut, unfiltered, unbriefed perspective on our product would really help to spread word of mouth about the brand, about the product. People would organically fall into our funnels that we create, just like things like that. Having that knowledge put me in a position to help kind of spearhead that program within BoxyCharm and understanding like how to build influencer marketing campaigns within the social media campaigns that you build, understanding channel strategies, right? And so what I would say is, going back to your question about how someone could possibly get to like where I am, like take internships, right? Like I don't think I guess you have to be 16 in order to work. But in most places, I don't know if that's different for like different states, but definitely like put yourself out there, right? There are so many different social media internship jobs, influencer marketing internships that exist, especially now, because the job market is shifting. Brands barely understood how many people internally they needed to run these departments across industries. And then COVID happening and the pandemic and just like changing the way that companies are first built internally, but then also how they outsource for talent to fill certain positions has changed the way that they look at certain things. And so internships within this realm, a dime a dozen, go out, find the type of company you want to work for, see if they have an internship, reach out to them. Even if they don't have something posted, send them an email, like find an email, like an HR email, and tell them that you're just interested. And if they have any internships available, you'd love to, talk to them about the opportunity. And if they don't, to just keep you in mind. I would say that's like the number one thing, but also, like having an interest in PR, because I think PR is not what it used to be. Magazines, they exist, but they're not like the number one driving vehicle of like storytelling anymore. Social media is, right? Like people aren't going out and buying billboards. They have them, but it's not like the number one thing that they think it's going to drive sales, right? Or even brand awareness. It still can, especially in metro areas like in LA or like in New York. They still, exist. People are still doing them. But if it's not there, you're not seeing the billboard. You're also not seeing, those things on the top of taxi cabs with like major brands promoting on them, right? Like you'll see their social campaign before you see their billboard, like really and truly. And so I think if you have a natural interest in what used to be traditional PR, excuse me, even traditional marketing, to be honest, any of those things kind of can lead you down the route of like hopefully wanting to be passionate enough about the digital atmosphere to kind of take on any opportunity, right, that you kind of see fit for the direction that you want to go. Because it also doesn't stop with social. I think that there are ways to still implement traditional marketing and PR values in a way that still are able to, impact businesses and brands that do pride themselves on whatever marketing they're doing. So it doesn't stop there, but it definitely, I think, is like the number one thing that you could do is just put yourself out there. Mm-hmm. I know I would welcome the help. Like if I got that type of email, I'd say, yes, come right now. Let's do this. I will teach you everything that I know. Right. So I can only imagine that the types of businesses that I've worked with in the past would also welcome that sort of invitation, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great advice. What do you think about there's potential kids out there that may have a little bit more responsibility growing up, maybe taking care of their siblings or come from a a background where they might not have the access to be able to get to internships. Do you have any advice for them on maybe doing like a personal branding, learn about the platform, since these platforms are sort of ubiquitous now, right? TikTok, Instagram, and things like that. How should they look at the or analyze the products that they're seeing, because they can see the end result of other marketers, right? Could they learn something from that? And do you have any recommendations from
Definitely,
that?
because the more you watch things, the more you see patterns. It's like a hard question to ask. I mean, it's not really, because I think understanding that, like, I don't even know if I can say this, like, understanding that, like, most social channels, like, want our attention, right? Like, once you start looking at the way that you use social media or the way that it's used, you can kind of begin to, like, break down the nuances of how a brand would use them, right? I think we all consume content differently, but if you begin to consume the content you see through the lens of more than just a piece of content, or like a funny piece of content, or like whatever, you will start to kind of unravel, what am I trying to say? You'll start to see similarities between the different pieces of content that you are looking at. And I think that becomes telling of how businesses and brands are able to utilize these platforms to do certain things. I don't know if that helps. I'm also like, how much am I saying?
No, I think I was just sort of reminded, because I watched a Mr. Beast interview recently about when he started, and he said he spent so much time attempting to reverse engineer and understand the audience of what they want. And so he would compare a lot of other content pieces, and he would just spend time with friends. Like, he's like 8 hours a day, we would just talk about different ideas that might attract someone's attention or what might capture someone's attention. And I was just curious if there's ways in which a person, like, let's say a junior high school student, they're growing up on the platforms, like, there are probably ways in which they should view the content that they're consuming, maybe sort of step back and look at it instead of just pure consumption.
100%. And I think that even like internally, the way that I coach my teams to look at things is to dissect, right? And so exactly what you're saying, and I guess I was going in this direction too earlier, was just that, like, you will start to see common threads between pieces of content, right? Like, if you look at, in a week's worth of time, right? Look at everything that came across your feed that was considered trending, right? What were your favorite pieces, and put them all kind of next to each other. And I don't know how you're doing that, but just play them back to back, right? Save them somehow on whatever platform it is that you're looking at, save them and watch them all. Like, write your notes. Like, why did this work? What was said at the beginning? What was done at the end? How was it edited? What did you think was funny? Did you not think it was funny? Like, just like all of those things. Once you write out your notes for those 5 videos or those 10 videos or however many it is that you see, you will see common denominators within all of them that kind of do essentially give you the recipe for how to reach audiences, right? And while none of those viral pieces of content will probably, I would say 90% of the time, no viral content is attached to a brand. 90%, because there are viral moments that brands have. But you'll notice that, like, brands will take that same equation, right, and twist it to make sense for their brand messaging, their brand positioning, and oftentimes it works, right? Like, the biggest example I can think of right now is like the corn thing with Chipotle, right? Like, extremely organic, like, moment, but they figured out how to make it work for their brand, to become another moment in time that had its own viral like storyline, right? And now everybody is like still using that audio. So I think that like figuring out how to do that is like a key indicator of being able to market product in this day and age on these platforms, right? Because it's not just about selling something, it's about emotionally connecting with people, but then also making people feel a certain way. Even if it's not about your brand, if you make them feel a certain way about whatever topic it is that you're promoting, you've pretty much done and gotten through half the battle. So
in this industry, do you think that degrees, getting a formal education, matters as much, or do you think that the experiences that you just talked about matters more?
I so I never want to deter anybody from getting an education. I think education is extremely important. I think you just have to always take it for what it is, though. Like, I don't think that you should go into getting higher education, and by higher education, I just mean beyond like high school, because obviously we all have to make it through high school, but beyond high school, I just wouldn't ever attach it to being able to have a specific type of job or a specific level of a job. Again, unless you're going for like a specific like like you want to become a doctor, you want to become a lawyer, you want to become an engineer, like that is completely different, because you will land a job that's like within that realm of what you studied. But if it's anything outside of that and it's just like general education, I think you should go into it because you want to have additional knowledge, not because you feel like this degree equals this job, or this degree equals this level of a job, or this title, or this pay, because it just simply, it doesn't anymore. It may have at one point in time, but it doesn't. And that's just like the truth of the matter. Now, what I will say is you absolutely do not need a degree to achieve anything like what we were talking about in terms of like being able to break something down and like see what the common denominators are, and then like action on that. Like I don't think that takes a degree to do. I also don't think that you need a degree to learn how to think critically, right? Because I think that, again, just going back to what we were saying at the beginning of the conversation, is just that is something that can be learned. That's a trait that can be learned. You can definitely coach your mind to being able to think outside of the box and think critically about different topics. Yeah, I don't think that you need to rely on a degree to be able to get to that point within your career, especially if it's within, the marketing, the area of marketing. Now, obviously, marketing isn't all creativity, and there's a lot of analysis that goes into it. So understanding numbers and things like that, but again, coming out of having and being able to paint a picture with numbers, you have to think critically about those numbers and decide which are important and which aren't in terms of like implementing them into a strategy or tactical experience. So you want knowledge of certain things, but I feel like nothing can't be researched and can't be built upon without a degree.
Okay. Yeah. One last question. You work with celebrities and you're in this space of agency. Have you seen anyone come sort of organically now, because social media is so prevalent and so accessible? Are there unorthodox ways to get to sort of your position through their own personal branding on maybe social media and things like that?
Oh, 100%. Like, you'll see that a lot of companies will favor, those who are able to like brand themselves online in some way, shape, or form, whether that's a website, whether that's a social account, being able to grow a social following and or being able to grow a social community is sometimes telling, right, of what you would be able to do at a brand level. So that I would say is like the number one unorthodox way to do it. I did not do it that way. Obviously, like I was knee deep in BoxyCharm and building their accounts. Like I didn't even have time to like think about my own. So it's not to say that businesses and brands don't also understand that like sometimes you're just so good at what you do for brands that you do it for brands and you're not doing it for yourself because you're just spent at that point. But if you are looking for ways to like kind of break into the industry and kind of get noticed, I would definitely say that organically building a community is the first way of doing that. And a following or an audience that you can then speak to when you're pitching yourself into a company and talking about kind of what you've been able to do on your own prior to perhaps being hired by them. It's always great to be able to speak to that because they will take that similarly as having an internship doing the same thing before a business, right? Now, I think having the understanding that building a personal brand is very different than building a community of people that follow and will intrinsically support a brand. It is a little bit different. But I think the same line of thinking, the same perspectives, and the same tactical expertise can really give you a good foundation for how to do it. Because then it's just a matter of understanding what their business is, who they're trying to target, why they're trying to target them, and kind of using your own experience to do that. I mean, even with like, I would say, thinking about the direction that Web3 is going and like how that will look. We obviously none of us know how Web3 will look. I mean, I think people have ideas based on like the blockchain technology and like NFTs and like, you know, cryptos, like all of that. Like we have an idea of the direction that it's going, but none of us truthfully know what's going to happen with it. And so I would say just like also staying up to date with all of these changes that happen in the digital space because they're happening every 6 to 9 months. If not 6 to 9, it's more like 9 to 18, but it's definitely no longer than 18 months. Things are like evolving on channels, algorithms are shifting, new social channels are popping up. And so just being abreast of those things and then how it can impact your ability to build, to create content. I think that is like the biggest key to all of it is having the understanding because one day Instagram might not exist. And so then it's like, okay, you've built a community there, but like now what? Or TikTok, same thing. Like who knows what's going to happen? There's all this talk about the users in China getting one version of it and us getting the other version. And then like, what does that mean for the US's perspective on this specific social channel? Like we don't know what's going to happen with them. So staying up to date with what they're born from, the new social channels, and like how they are operating under this newly evolved perspective of like the consumer is also just extremely important. Because I mean, if you have an eye for and can understand how content is created and how it reaches mass audiences, you can transfer that pretty much to any medium, right? Whether it's Web 2 or Web 3.
Yeah, no. Well, I really appreciate all your time that you just gave and all the advice that you provided. Like your story is enlightening. It's so fascinating from public policy and then into now working with celebrities, which I don't think is a path that anyone would have ever guessed if they knew you earlier on.
No, for sure. I mean, maybe some people would be like, no, like I saw it because people tell me that all the time. Like, oh, like we knew that like you would be doing something like this, like whatever. But like I wouldn't have thought about it myself for sure. Like I was still stuck in like courtroom. I look good. Like how does everybody else look? I don't know, but like I look the best. I was stuck there for a while. So very interesting, but yeah, no.
In a way that was marketing, right? Thinking about how you're going to look, the presentation. Yeah. So it makes a lot of sense.
Right? There's the connection right there.
Yeah. How can our audience find you? Is there anything that you'd like to promote?
Yeah, for sure.
Feel free to.
So, my personal Instagram is just my first and last name. It's at Zari Ivey. It's spelled Zariivey. And I'm actually, that's my handle across every single social media channel or platform. But then, if you're just interested in checking out my agency and or have questions, or you are interested in some sort of internship, feel free to reach out to me. My doors are always open. The social handle for the agency is Noiz Media. It's spelled Noiz. There's a dot and then media. And then our website is just www.noizmedia.com, Noizmedia.com.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot, Zari, for enlightening us with your experiences. I think it's been really helpful, especially in the modern day with marketing. So really, thank you for your time.
Of course, and thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. I loved having this conversation. So I hope that we get to do it again sometime soon.
Yeah, hopefully. We look forward to it.
Awesome.
Hey, thanks for joining us at Mentor Access. If you like what you just watched, please click like and subscribe, and also hit that bell so that you get notified when we have new videos come out. Thank you for supporting our mission. Great. Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing everything that you know and your experiences.
Of course.
So, yeah, thanks for joining us. This is the Life of a Career podcast. Yeah. Thanks. I'll figure out how to edit that ending.
I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No worries. Maybe we just do another take.
We can start over now.
Yeah, let's just do another take because I won't be the one editing. Actually, Kyle will be, so I'm just saving him.
Yeah, all good. I'm down. I get how it is.
He chatted and said another take. Yeah.